Let's talk about the astrology of the Epstein files and the effect on human consciousness. So this is not the video that I was planning on making today, but I believe it's the video that I was supposed to make. My plan for today's video was to talk about some things that I found in the files. I was going to do a studio video so I could show you guys some research and documents that I pulled directly from the publicly shared files, and I kept getting pulled down deeper and deeper rabbit holes to the point where I needed to do some meditation to regulate. But when I was meditating, I was trying to also do a remote viewing session at the same time, so kind of setting the intention to show me something about the files because I was feeling a little overwhelmed. So I took like a 2-hour meditation session, just completely quieted my mind. And whenever I sit down to remote view or work with a client, the way that information has always hit me is that I'll get in that really deep meditative state where it's just complete silence. And it's like I'm still aware of my body, but I don't feel like I'm necessarily in it, if that makes any sense. And then all of a sudden I'll be jolted awake by an image or a thought or something. And today I was awakened by a lot of thoughts about the Epstein files, about what they were doing, about rabbit holes that I should continue to explore with the files. And the ultimate rabbit hole that it led me down was to take a step away from going too far down the rabbit hole of looking into the specifics and to talk about this in more of a general way of how it's impacting human consciousness. Because if you are on the internet right now, maybe your page also looks like this, where Epstein files are everywhere, in every video, just people pulling all sorts of weird stuff out of there. And it's really overwhelming. And because everyone is watching it and listening to what's in there or doing their own research, it creates a pool in the collective field. And kind of, I've done other videos about this before where I've talked about the collective conscience and pendulums, which are pendulums. They're energy forms, and they get filled with so much momentum that they can sweep you away with them. So if reality is created from human beings consciously pulling from this collective field or the collective unconscious, like Carl Jung talks about, and a lot of other teachers talk about this concept too. I've heard Stephen Greer talk about it, especially when he talks about disclosure and meditation, how we all have access to this collective conscience. And when I was reading through the Epstein files, some of the emails I found in there were very interesting because despite all the bad stuff that's come out, there's a lot of, I don't know if this was related to any of the crimes or not, but there are a lot of emails between a man named Gino Yu and Epstein, like thousands of emails. And they mention gifted minds and also groups of these gifted minds and people with special psychic abilities. So it's clear that Epstein and his people in positions of power and influence that were interested in all the things that we've been talking about on this channel. So genetics, eugenics, and gifted minds. They were really interested, apparently, in children with special abilities. And then they also mentioned how trauma would somehow enhance those abilities. So there was a specific mention of one child who was a stage 3 gifted. So I'm not exactly sure how they defined the stages of giftedness, but I did do some further research about stages of giftedness. And I forget the person who coined this. It was just a simple Google search. And I think in the search that I found, there was 5 stages of giftedness. And it wasn't always necessarily related to the IQ. There are different levels of giftedness as far as above average giftedness, above average, like lightly gifted. So it's probably people with an IQ of like upper 120s. And then we've got very gifted. I don't know if it's called very gifted because I'm not looking at the paperwork right now, but the specially gifted ones were 130 and higher IQ. But then they had 2 more stages after that, which were sometimes around the same IQ, like 130s, 140s, but the way that they processed math or information was even more gifted than the stage 3 gifted. And then in the files, they referenced psychic abilities, which I thought was really interesting because they talked about how this could impact human potential. And this is a quote that really got it for me. So the quote that they use in these emails was, if you've got 5 jazz players who play jazz really well, you're going to get really phenomenal jazz. But if you have 5 crappy jazz players, you're going to get crappy jazz. So they were using that as a metaphor for trying to get, I guess, gifted children together. But for what, I don't know. I wasn't able to dig that far deep into the documents. And I'm sure we could sit here and make a lot of speculations. And because there's literally millions of files, I'm not sure that answer is going to be easily found. Not to mention, so much of it is redacted and so much of it is still unreleased that even if we could find it in there, I have a hard time believing that they, considering most of the people in the files have yet to be prosecuted, but they don't want us to know everything, right? So even, I feel like the files were really released to make people happy or to kind of fool the majority of people into thinking like, oh, here's everything, here it is right in front of you, when the reality is that there's probably still stuff going on because there's people that still haven't been prosecuted. And then there's even speculation, I think this is even in the files, where one of the officers working at the prison that Epstein was held in was saying that he thinks that they switched him out because he saw Epstein come out on a wheelchair and it was like undocumented or something. I don't know if it was on camera or he just saw this, and then he thinks that they switched him out. So this is a really interesting theory because in the documents, there's a lot of information about cloning and DNA and the interest in enhanced psychic abilities. Not to mention Epstein talking about how he wanted to spread his genes, and then there's information about 23andMe DNA in there as well. And then there's also stuff that I saw about tunnels and Hamas, and I didn't even look further into those documents because it's just so overwhelming, just so much information. So all of that to say, there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of stuff that's coming to light. And my feeling after looking through it was that this is a rabbit hole that goes really, really deep. And maybe the files being released in itself is the rabbit hole, is the distraction. So I was asking myself, well, what is it distracting us from? So that's when I started to think, well, let's look into the astrology. Let's talk about the astrology, because astrology is a language that helps me make sense of where we're heading collectively, what's going on, what are we learning from this. So I want to get into the collective astrology, and then we'll see where else this video goes, because I feel like this isn't going to be only about astrology, but we're going to kind of talk about what's being uncovered right now for humanity and the effect that it's having on human consciousness, our future, the disclosure movement, and human potential, etc. So let's get into the astrology. So what I found really interesting when I looked at the upcoming eclipse chart, so it's going to be a new moon solar eclipse on February 17, 2026 in Aquarius at 28 degrees. When I looked at that chart, the chart had most of the planets, pretty much all of the planets other than just a few, are Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. And this is so important in terms of where we're heading in regards to humanity and consciousness itself. So the reason I looked at the eclipse chart, which is only a couple weeks away, is because eclipse energy lasts and lingers for 3 to 6 months afterwards. And you can usually feel the energy pretty strongly when you're getting closer and closer to the eclipse, right? So usually like the month before an eclipse happens, you'll start to notice that your own personal life is getting a little intense. There may be stuff coming up like a move, a significant relationship, a job change, birth of a child, passing away of somebody, crazy. It could be life-changing events usually occur around eclipses. But there's also a collective energy in the field as well. So that's what we're going to look at today. But 28 degrees is really significant in astrology because 29 degrees is where the sign ends. And that's known as the anaretic degree point, the culmination or a crisis point. So we're right along that degree. We're right almost right next to it. 28 degrees is at the very end of Aquarius. And Aquarius rules technology. So that is interesting to me, how these files are revealing a lot about human potential, or what they were interested in as far as human potential, gifted minds being a part of that conversation. And then technology like cloning and whatever they were interested in, cloning pretty much. And all the other technology that comes from knowing how to do that. They can clone humans, apparently, and animals, and then human embryos is another thing that I read in the documents. So some kind of ending, yet also simultaneous new beginning in the sign of Aquarius, which is also the sign of collective revolution, the higher mind coming online. So I always think of Uranian energy or Aquarian energy as a flash of lightning. Aquarius and Capricorn used to both be ruled by Saturn, but Uranus is the modern day ruler of Aquarius and astrology. But Saturn is, I think, also associated with Zeus, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, Zeus I always associate with lightning. But Saturn is more like the stern father, leader, limitations, and boundaries. And Uranus is more like the higher mind, chaos, change. And if you look at what's happening right now, especially with the revelation of the files, there is a lot of chaos that is happening in the collective field. And a lot of people would like to see some people, answer for what's being done to helpless victims and the horrendous crimes that are being talked about in these files. So could there be an ending to this type of behavior? Could this be a new beginning in some way, even though it's kind of maybe it's closing out some kind of Aquarian cycle, because this is a new beginning since it's a new moon solar eclipse. So the energy will be powerful over the next 3 to 6 months, but it's also kind of ending something in Aquarian themes anyway. So maybe those of us who have felt like a revolution is coming, like things need to change, maybe that means that it finally will. And the reason that I think that is because we also have a bunch of planets huddled together in Pisces and also Aries, which is the precipice of the old world and the new world. Not to mention that 2026 is a number 1 year in numerology. So there's already strong energy for new beginnings this year. And I think things are really going to get kicked into high gear in February. So you probably already feel that too, with especially with the release of something so big like this. So another important thing to note about the planets that are activated in this eclipse is that Saturn and Neptune have finally closed out their cycles in Pisces. I think one of them, I can't remember, I think Saturn is still in Pisces at the time I'm making this video, but they'll both be in Aries at the time of the eclipse. So Neptune is collapsing old structure, blurring boundaries, sweeping away old karmic cycles. And Saturn is giving structure to something. So we're giving structure to our dreams with this energy. And Aries is the energy of new beginnings and individual sovereignty and leadership, right? So we also kind of look at what Aries and Aquarius, how they interact with each other. So since it's air and fire, those are compatible energies. So this is pretty much supportive. The sun consciousness, the moon, the unconscious are being supported by Saturn, father time and father of limitations and karmic contracts, and then Neptune dissolving the old, clearing out karma. The higher, kind of like our higher sense of spirituality is also what can be ruled by Neptune. So a couple of other things to note about the eclipse is that the collective north node is in Pisces, so that's the destiny that we're moving towards. And Pisces is spirituality, and it can also be a little bit disillusioned at times. So that's an important thing that we need to watch for in the collective energy field, but also in ourselves. The ability, or like, be careful that we're not being deceived by something. And I think that's maybe one of the lessons of Pisces that we're learning, like how to have strong boundaries so that we are not deceived. Because anytime there's strong Pisces energy, it's very common to want to put your head under the rug and not pay attention to it. You want to get lost in some kind of escapist tendencies, and substance abuse can also be common when there's a lot of Piscean energy. But people also have awakenings with this energy. So the lower polarity, or the negative split of the Pisces energy, is I'm going to bury my head in the sand. I'm going to go crazy on substances and just get lost and blur my boundaries and give my power away to something outside of me. But the higher split of that energy is using that energy consciously and recognizing I am my own creator, or not that I am God in an egoic sense, but I'm co-creating reality with the universe, with God. So it comes down to having a balance of, give and take with the flow of the universe, right? So instead of just like I am ego and I'm just going to completely cut God out, or the universe or universal consciousness out, I'm working with it. I'm understanding my place in the universe and what it needs from me and what I can contribute to humanity and the collective field. So big themes of this happening, a lot of endings and beginnings at the same time, big focus on technology and future-oriented energy, because that's also what the Aquarian energy is. And then the other important thing to look at in the chart is that because we have so many planets in Aquarius, and the ruler of Aquarius is Uranus, we also should look at what Uranus is in. And Uranus is at 27 degrees of Taurus, which is also ending its stay in Uranus. Taurus is ending its stay in Uranus. So what does that mean? Well, Uranus is technology, and right now it's in Taurus. So that's what we can see, what we can smell, what we can taste, what we can touch. It's an earth sign. It wants practical tools to experience the world. But it's going to be moving into Gemini. But we're still closing out Taurus themes. So that can be banking, that can be education, that can be any kind of top-down structure or system, corporations, etc. All of that stuff could also be coming to light, like the corruption in those industries coming to light, and these systems kind of slowly continuing to be dismantled until we get into Uranus and Gemini energy, which we already experienced in 2025 before it retrograded back into Taurus. So this is also kind of like closing out of these old cycles. So Uranus and Gemini is also going to be an energy that really affects us this coming year. Maybe not till later months in the year, whenever Uranus makes its transition into Gemini. But we're kind of paving the way for that, or preparing. The energy right now is preparing us to pave the way for more focus on community and knowledge, because Gemini is also about learning and moving around your local neighborhood and community. So that's pretty much the astrology that we've got going on. And then we also have Jupiter in Cancer still, and I think that's an important energy to look at also. So Cancer is a water sign, and with all these planets in Pisces, that means that the Jupiter energy is also compatible, or it's making a harmonious aspect to all the planets that are in Pisces. So the North Node in Pisces, collective destiny, it's trining with Jupiter, which is our conscious expansion. Sorry, I'm trying to cut the wind out of my headphones, so I'll hold the camera like this so I don't get the wind gusts in my ear. But Jupiter being at 24 degrees of Cancer, kind of in the last degree points of Cancer, not quite the last, but still kind of in the ending degree points of it. And Jupiter is what we're expanding into, so that's why I think a lot of things from the past are coming up, because if you really think about Epstein, he was taken into custody, I think, in 2019. So it's definitely in our past, even though this stuff has probably obviously still been going on, and people feel like not enough people are being prosecuted. and taking accountability for what happened, and we're not seeing justice in the system, especially with all these people being listed. So hopefully with the release of these documents, we'll start to see justice in some way, or maybe it will just wake up people and I don't know, maybe lead them down productive rabbit holes instead of these negative rabbit holes, because I think that's something really that people need to be aware of, myself included, when we're on the hunt to go down these rabbit holes to try to figure something out. We're getting dopamine spikes every time we look at something. We kind of get a new fact, and it can be very kind of exciting, especially when all this stuff is being revealed, but it can also kind of be a trap and can put more of the collective consciousness and our collective conscious energy into creating these outcomes that we don't want. Because if you think about what the Epstein files actually are, what's being revealed in them, stuff like cloning, stuff like SRA and SA and worship of these satanic deities, all this stuff that is very much what most people, I would imagine, would consider negative, unless they're part of that club, but negative. And when we're giving our energy to that, let's hope that our conscious attention on it doesn't continue to manifest more of these scenarios, right? So I always like to say, what is the solution that we can be focused on instead of the problem? So what is the solution? I've always kind of seen this solution as the same thing: conscious awareness, personal sovereignty, understanding how your attention is being hijacked by all of these things that are coming out in the news, and how you're relating to that information, right? So I understand it can sometimes feel hypocritical for me, like talking about pop culture events, but I also feel like in talking about them, the point of talking about things like this on my channel are not to follow the trends, but following the trends in a sense that a lot of people are focused on this stuff. So I would like to be a voice that can say, you know, continue to encourage people to ask themselves questions like, why are we so focused on this stuff? And how can we maintain our autonomy and our emotional energy and imagination so we're not contributing to their agenda? So it's all about awareness. And I really hope that when you watch my videos, you feel more empowered and more hopeful about the future, because I think another big trap is that people are going down all these rabbit holes and all this horrific information is being exposed, and then people are losing hope and losing faith for the future. And then because we lose hope and faith, a lot of people are like, well, why am I even trying to do anything? Maybe I should just like go hide alone in my room and not participate in life at all because it's just too hard and I don't see how I can fix it. So that's what we want to avoid. But I think that with this eclipse cycle, and right now, I think more and more people are going to be waking up. And I think that as more of the crazy stuff comes to light, we'll also find more people digging into their power if they're using that information or that energy, if they're transmuting it, right? If they know how to transmute it. So I did say, have said in many of my other videos, that pain is the greatest teacher. At least it has been for me. And you will never know your true power until someone tries to take that away from you. I've never been activated into recognizing my own power or claiming it until I had an external figure try to take it away from me. So if you have any kind of trauma, now is the time that we should not shy away from working through that trauma and understanding how our past has shaped our belief systems. That's pretty much a big part of the astrology right now, Jupiter and Cancer. Cancer is the inner child or childhood experiences. So how has that all shaped our consciousness? I think that's why people are so interested in the GATE program right now, and things like Ma World or the Gateway Tapes, things that are from the past and from our childhood. I think that's why I love talking about the DARE program too, because that's another huge thing that I think has shaped our collective consciousness. And I think it's really important for people to be aware of why we are the way we are, because understanding the why of how we turn out the way we are can help us put together why we continue to do the things we do and once something comes to light in our conscious awareness, then we can take those conscious steps to make new behaviors, right? Because this channel is all about supporting you on your journey to conscious choosing of the reality that you want to experience. So you're not living on autopilot anymore, co-creating these realities that we don't want. And I think ultimately, going back to what I was talking about in the beginning of the video with the documents that I was reading through, the emails between Gino Yu, I think he's involved in tech or something, and definitely had an interest in consciousness, human potential, and gifted minds. But the emails between him and Epstein and just their conversations about consciousness. So I'm not here to make accusations about anyone. I'm not saying this guy is a bad guy. For all we know, he could have just, he might not have been involved in any of the bad stuff, because I think it's important to not jump to conclusions unless we have specific evidence. I certainly would not want to be associated with something negative, and how many of us have hung out with somebody that we didn't know was an abuser, and then somebody tells us months or years later, and we're like, oh God, I was supportive of that person. I was their friend. I had no idea that they were doing this to girls on the side. I would have not hung out with them or supported them. Like, that's happened to me in my own comedy scene. Just people doing shady stuff, and then you find out about it, and then you're like, okay, now I'm gonna consciously choose not to hang out with these people anymore or support them. So I think the other thing to think about when it comes to judging someone's character based on who we associate ourselves with, I think it's important, but also we have to be aware that there is also such a thing as we meet somebody and we don't get a chance to discern their character until spending a little bit of time with them, and then our inner discernment says something is off about them, so now I'm going to disengage. So like I said, not making accusations about this Gino Yu guy. I don't know much about him. I would like to continue to look into his research and what he was interested in, especially how gifted minds were involved. And the other thing I want to end with is some things that I saw during my remote viewing session and meditation session earlier, especially when I was thinking of the gifted minds and what the documents revealed about their conversations. And the thing that I immediately thought about was 11 in Stranger Things. I think it must have been season 1. And I don't remember if this was a scene or not, but I think it might have been. So wasn't there a scene where she was being held at Montauk Point? And I don't know her backstory. I don't know if she was like a cloned baby or if like somebody gave her away. I don't know if she was a naturally gifted child that was captured. So I don't know how she ended up as part of this experiment that I guess, I don't know if it was the CIA in the show that was, oh man, I hate these planes. I don't know if it was the CIA that was keeping her captive or whatever. But I remember a scene, I don't know if this was a real thing, but anyways, in my mind I saw 11 being told to meet other kids in the void. So it's like she was taken to a place in her imagination, whether that was through hypnosis or meditation, and then she met other children in the void. So it made me think, that the phrase about the jazz, so 5 amazing jazz players creating amazing jazz, or 5 crappy jazz players creating crappy jazz, it was a metaphor for giftedness. So what happens if you know that creative visualization can open a portal and put something into the collective energy field so we can manifest, which is the goal of demonic energy, because they lack that power of connection with source energy, so they need to manipulate other people in order to have power and in order to create, because they're not, I don't know, I'm thinking of disembodied spirits who don't have a human body or physical vessel to create, but their souls are trapped here in the earth field, so they manipulate people. And I guess, if we're thinking about like the cult of Hollywood or these organizations that are involved in SRA and like horrible things that are happening in the world, a lot of these people, the deals that they're making with the devil is like they're supported in the physical world, but their spirits are demonic, and they forever will need to grab their power from other people. And I think gifted minds have a lot of power to create because they're creative and they're gifted. They're not copiers. So it makes sense to me from a spiritual perspective. And I think Candace Owens was even talking about this in a recent episode where she was talking about the files, about how they need other people to create for them. So, because this is ultimately a spiritual battle that's being fought right now, a battle over consciousness. And like I said, what I saw during my remote viewing session is where 11 was meeting another kid in the void. So in other words, meeting another child or another gifted person in her astral body, or when she was being told to visualize another world or visualize another setting, and she met other people there. But this could have also been happening in different locations. So they could have been, in theory, working with different kids on different ley lines across the world and telling each of these individual gifted minds to envision the pyramids, envision an alien, watch this movie where you'll automatically be visualizing something. So they do that in enough places around the world, and all of a sudden these realities are starting to be put into physical form because of our collective thought forms, especially those with the gifted minds who have the strongest power and ability to manifest, which is what they were interested in, because gifted minds have the most ability and power to manifest and create reality for the collective field, right? So I feel like as gifted people, there's a responsibility to really pay attention to what we're contributing to the field. And really, one of the things I've been thinking about too, especially with all this creative energy that I've been feeling lately, probably from the Aquarian energy and the Pisces energy, which is also very creative, but the Aries energy, which helps you take action. But all this creative energy, I was just thinking, I don't see a lot of movies or TV shows where they have a really positive future, you know, like where the future isn't some dystopian apocalyptic wasteland, or it's not some police state where everybody is being controlled by AI. And I was trying to envision what a beautiful future looks like. One of the reasons why I super love Dr. Stephen Greer is because I've heard him talk about in his videos and podcasts about how he was in a meditation session, and from a really young age, he was shown, when he was connecting with these extraterrestrial entities, he was shown a beautiful version of Earth. And part of the reason that he's kept going this whole time is because he wants us to see that beautiful future, like what it's capable of. And to me, when I visualize like a beautiful Earth, I visualize, you know, an abundant green planet and natural ways of doing things, and people working in communities together, not because we're forced to be some worker bee or some ant who's supposed to be thrown into a factory and continue to eat poison, genetically modified food. Like, no, I'm thinking more like hunter-gatherers, but in a way where we've kind of found a balance between how to use technology in a way that supports us and supports the planet as well, because I think the planet is also a living, breathing entity that we all connect with. And I think the true beast system is technology. But I think that I would like to think that maybe we can find a way to coexist with technology and maybe be some of the forerunners in understanding how to use technology to benefit us rather than to spy on us and surveillance states and all that stuff. And another thing just that kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I read through the files was cloning human embryos, because it reminded me of something that I read the other day about, I see a truck up here, but something I read the other day about human embryos being used in food as, like, I don't know if it was as bread conditioners or what, but every time you look at a food label and it says genetically modified ingredients or bioengineered food ingredients, they're, from my knowledge, using, I don't know if it's stem cells or embryos or what. So it just weirds me out. And also the fact that most of the fruits and stuff you buy in the store are sprayed with I think it's ethylene gas to ripen the fruit faster, which apparently is naturally occurring, but is it? I don't know. And I don't know how safe it is. So I would love to see people coming together in communities and learning how to, be live harmoniously with Earth again and learn how to make our own food and learn how to make clothing out of sheep fibers where they're not harmed in the process. They're just using the wool and natural cotton and hemp and all these progressive things that we can do where we're not harming the planet, and then we're not over consuming, because that's the biggest problem with humanity, like just so much crap. So that's why I haven't shopped at a legit store besides Goodwill or any kind of thrift shops in a really long time, because I don't want to contribute to that new waste. So as much as I can. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means. I'm sure I've bought stuff. I'm guilty of buying this hat from Hobby Lobby, and that's probably not a store that I should be super supportive of, but I try my best to source like 90% at least of my items from thrift shops, so I can just play a small part in reducing waste on the planet and just trying to be the example of how we can kind of clean up some of the mess that we've made around here. So anyways, I am trying to avoid this truck ahead, but I hope this video resonated. And if you need additional tools for sovereignty, to work through your trauma, shadow work, etc., there's plenty of opportunities here on my page. I've got a link in my description of every video. I've got tools for habit tracking and fear inventory so you can uncover your belief systems that are blocking you. I have opportunities to do astrology and human design readings with me, and one-on-one tarot remote viewing sessions, which are extremely insightful for helping you find emotional clarity. You can check out the testimonials on my Instagram page. I've been doing this since 2017 as far as the readings go, and I love doing them. So check that out if you're interested, and I'll see you guys in the next video.